Welcome to PIL webinar number 63, Coach the Coach, Calling the Right Plays. I'm Sandra Oliver Schmidt with the Procurement Innovation Lab, and I'm joined by my colleague, David Jablonski.
Hi, everyone. Sandra, I am so excited. Tonight is the first night of the NFL Draft.
Oh, cool. I know they draft football players, but do they also draft football coaches?
Not at all. This is just for drafting players. Although I'm sure some teams out there would love to draft a new coach as well.
I wonder if sometimes the teams we coach here in the PIL wish they could draft their own coaches too.
Actually, PIL coaches are not the only procurement innovation coaches available at DHS. In fact, today's webinar features a coach from ICE.
Well, maybe this webinar will inspire other procurement innovators out there to become coaches too.
Before we get started with our coaching-themed webinar, we have some brief housekeeping to take care of. First, sign in with your full name and DHS email address using the chat pod to prove you attended this webinar and get your credit. If you didn't type your name and email address in the chat pod when you entered the seminar room, please go ahead and type that in now. For example, david.jablonski@hq.dhs.gov. If you registered or didn't register in advance of today's webinar, just go ahead and do the same process. Type your full name and email address in the chat pod. If you did not register on Seaside, you will need to track your CLPs you earned today manually. If you're on the phone only, then please email us at pil@hq.dhs.gov sometime today, and we will confirm your attendance for credit. If you do not type your name or email in the chat pod, then we have no way of adjudicating you attended for credit, so please do so. If we jump from one pod to the next, you do not need to re-enter your name again. We will have that record in Adobe. If you type your email once, then you're good. Now for a quick orientation for those who haven't attended before, or if it's been a while. In the bottom right corner, we have the chat box. Not only is this where you can type your full name and email address for credit, it's also where you can submit your questions at any time. We have dedicated PIL staff monitoring the questions, so please don't leave any question in your hip pocket. We don't want this to be a one-way conversation where the audience asks the PIL questions only. We encourage you to interact with each other as well. So feel free to respond to your colleagues when there's something that you want to address. For those of you who are unable to sign into Adobe and are on the phone with PowerPoint slides, you can still participate in the conversation. Email your questions and comments to the PIL inbox at pil@hq.dhs.gov. We have PIL team members standing by to take your questions. On the bottom of the screen is where you can find some helpful PIL links. Those are behind the polls that are there right now. To the top right, you can find the downloads box where you can access the downloads documents that we'll be going over today at any time. Just click the upper right-hand drop-down to download all. You will see the poll questions throughout the presentation today, so keep an eye out and be sure to respond. In fact, there's 2 poll questions to respond to right now. Finally, there is a full screen option. Just click the square with the 4 little arrows to maximize, and then click it again to minimize. That wraps up the clerical piece items.
We also want to take a moment to let you know about an exciting survey that's coming out this summer. The Office of the Chief Procurement Officer's annual Competing Values Framework Assessment will be launched and will be available for 1 month only. The Competing Values Framework Assessment is designed to help DHS understand the preference and priorities of our acquisition community. That is, our culture. We have to know where we are in order to know where we want to go. Please take the time to answer the survey to make sure your voice is heard on how you perceive the culture of your procurement office and your organization so that we can continue to improve where we work and how we do business. And now previously on the PIL.
Webinar 62 is titled, My Colleague is a Robot, Emerging Technology and the Procurement Process. This 1.5-hour webinar answered questions like, can robots be used to award contracts faster? How about deobligate funds? Check a vendor responsibility or send an email. Go watch that webinar to understand the various types of emerging technology available to make procurements faster and easier. You can find a recording of this PIL webinar on the PIL homepage. On the line with us today, besides Sandra and myself, we are joined by some of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Cyber Defense, and Intelligence Support Services team members. First, we have Stephanie Creasy from the ICE Program Office. Hello. Next is Jennifer Kasdan, the Contract Specialist.
Hello.
And also James Abiad, the coach for this project.
Hi, everybody.
We'll hear more from them soon. But first, let's go over the poll questions.
So right now, as for how many PIL webinars you've attended, it looks like a majority of you have attended 2 to 4. That means we have a lot of newer faces here, and we're so happy to see you. And for those 21 of you who've attended over 10, welcome back. We're glad you're with us again. As for what your primary role is within the acquisition community, once again, it looks like we have just as many more program managers than we do contracting officers here today. That's pretty exciting. And those of you who are core technical evaluators, I think we definitely have something for you today as we learn a lot about oral presentations and pre-solicitation planning. And now we are extremely lucky to have with us Al Dayton, the head of contracting activity from ICE, to kick us off with a tone from the top. Al, thanks for being with us today, and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be participating in the Procurement Innovation Lab's 63rd webinar. I am pleased to introduce the Cyber Defense and Intelligence Support Services team from ICE and their coach, who is also the ICE Acquisition Innovation Advocate. Today, you will hear how this team was coached by a member of the ICE Procurement Office as they use a new innovative procurement technique called case studies and learn just how important pre-solicitation planning can be to the successful execution of oral presentations and an efficient procurement timeline. Having an on-site coach allowed this team to quickly develop trust with each other early in the process and gave the team unique insights into ICE procurement culture as they worked together to award the requirement quickly and without a bridge contract. It is common that contracting teams are tasked with requirements, and the perception is each of you has to take on the challenge alone, but you do not have to feel like you are on an island. A lot of that support can be found from PIL webinars such as this one today, where acquisition professionals learn about PIL techniques, learn about how other teams across DHS have used those techniques successfully, and gain confidence in their ability to innovate the procurement process. There's also coaching support available directly through the PIL, or as in this team found out, from team members that are being trained to become innovation coaches at DHS components. And that's exactly what happened here. The contracting team wanted to provide the best support for the program lead that was facing the challenge of being a first-time evaluator. They had a tight timeline to award the order, and they sought assistance to implement new processes. The coaching support they received from inside their own organization helped provide a tailored coaching approach as they knew all of the ins and outs of the ICE organization. This coaching support proved to be beneficial to helping the team obtain approvals in a timely manner, find capable vendors, avoid a bridge contract, and create a more efficient evaluation process. The PIL has provided support to those on the front lines of our acquisition process for a considerable amount of time, coaching teams through these innovative techniques and coaching our acquisition workforce to try new ways to better deliver our mission faster. But what is even more exciting is that there are coaching resources available outside of the PIL within your own organization, just like the support the CDISS team found within ICE. What we hear today is truly evidence that there are a vast number of resources available to you and your teams as you develop your procurement strategies. I am truly proud of this ICE team and pleased that they get to share their story today. I want to thank each member of the team for their hard work on this project, Jennifer Kasdan and Pamela Rogers from the procurement side, Stephanie Creasy from our program office, and James Abiad, the ICE coach for the team. I thank each of you for being with us today and know what the CDISS team has to say will resonate and motivate each of you on some level. I hope you enjoy their story. Back to you, Sandra.
Thank you so much, Al, and thank you so much for your very verbal support of your team, and we really appreciate you being here today. Now, time for us to dive right into our content today, where we will hear from a team who was not coached by a PIL coach, but instead was coached by a member of their own component's acquisition workforce, while the PIL merely shadowed that coach. If we move on to our next slide, for those who are following along separately, we're on slide number 2. Here is our playbook for today, or our agenda. First, you're going to hear more from this ICE team, learn what part of the FAR they were in, and learn a bit more about the innovations they used. Then we're going to dive into a few of those innovations, and finally, you're also going to hear vendor feedback, and there will be a post-game analysis. All right, now on slide number 3, let's take a little more time to meet our team. We will start with the coach. James, welcome to the program today. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody again. My name is James Abiad. I am obviously the acquisition innovation advocate now. I started with DHS in 2010 in this beautiful building just downstairs at 7th and D at DHS headquarters as a contract specialist, then became a contracting officer, and now wear several hats, including policy desk officer, audit liaison, and this coach role, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Thank you, James. Stephanie. So I am a program manager in the Cyber Defense and Intelligence branch at ICE, and I'm the PM for the Cyber Defense and Intelligence Support Services contract that we're talking about today. And Jennifer Kasdan, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Hi, I joined DHS in 2015 as part of the Acquisition Career Program, and now I am part of the ICE Office of Acquisitions in the ITD division.
Brilliant. And that is our coach and players for the day.
All right, and to make sure you don't bowl a gutter ball on your next procurement, we need to make sure that we're staying in our lane, right? And so before we get moving forward with our webinar today, let's make sure we know where we are. So today's team, we're going to be going over FAR 16.505, orders under multiple award contracts, just so we know where we are.
And on to slide number 5, we have the innovative plays that were used by this team. They used a total of 10 innovative procurement techniques, but we're going to be focusing on 3. Involve end users, that's our jam sessions and our pre-solicitation planning. You'll hear about case studies, which is a brand new technique that was first used by this team. And also, this team used oral presentations, which you've heard about before, but this team has some important lessons learned regarding the planning of those oral presentations and how best to use on-the-spot questions. Moving on to slide number 6, webinar refreshers. So relevant webinars to what we're talking about today, we have webinar number 54, Innovations from Outside DHS, Stories from 3 New PIL Coaches. This webinar is where case studies was first introduced, along with a few other innovative procurement techniques that are now available to all of you to use. Next, we have webinar number 55, Why Trust Matters, Procurement Outcomes When Risks Are Managed, Not Avoided. This webinar talks about team empowerment, something you're going to hear a lot about today. And it also discusses how in 15.3, a plethora of innovative procurement techniques can be used. And moving on to slide number 7, we're going to be bringing a poll up. Now, first, we want to get the coach's perspective on how in the world, James, did it work out that you ended up becoming a coach for this procurement team?
Yeah, let me first say I'm honored to be associated with Ted Lasso on the same slide. So the last AIA at ICE was our chief of staff while it was kind of a new role. And after he left the office, our front office thought of me just because of my interest in some of the PIL activities and methods. So I just kind of fell into the role a bit as a policy analyst and then kind of jumped into all the new opportunities it provided. The nice thing about this role is that it's very open-ended. You can make it what you want. So as I got more familiar with the AI methods, promoting them across the organization, the PIL just offered all of the AIAs a chance to coach whenever they felt ready. And since I didn't feel 100% ready, just figured I'd dive in on the next available opportunity, which I offered for whenever the next ICE requirement came into the PIL, and that's how it all started.
Well, can you tell us a little bit, what had your experience been with procurement innovation up to this point?
I had taken, of course, probably 2 PIL boot camps by then, and I luckily got to take maybe the first coaching clinic at the time, which was a great experience, but really most of the experience comes from just hands-on, getting to test the methods in procurements. I got to see a lot of procurements across our organization as through policy reviews, and from that perspective. So a little bit from a grassroots level, I got to incorporate some methods into these procurements as long as contracting officers were willing to let me work with them on that process. So we really got to see how things worked little by little, as much as was available to us.
Also, whenever the PIL was formally coaching a team at ICE, you were always at those biweekly meetings, and you were always incredibly helpful with some of the ins and outs of the local culture, if you will, because every component has a very particular local culture to navigate when trying something new. Now, on the slide here, we do have our 3 PIL Digi badges. And James, you were working towards that level 2, the Innovation Coach Digi badge. Were you successful?
It appears I was. Yeah, just by completing this coaching clinic and getting this hands-on experience in coaching this team, that got me the level 2 badge.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, well, moving on to slide number 8, we're going to talk about what we are buying today. Now, Stephanie, can you explain, it looks like I see here, it's cyber defense and intelligence support services. Can you break that down for our audience today?
Sure. So we're responsible for 24/7, 365 cybersecurity monitoring of the ICE network. That includes incident response, monitoring for things like misuse, threat actors, hacking, phishing, the whole spectrum, pen testing, and the other cyber defense activities that are included in there. And we do that for the entire ICE environment.
Do you only do this for ICE?
So we are actually a cybersecurity service provider in DHS and a center of excellence for cybersecurity services. So we do provide services to other DHS components if they would like to purchase services. We currently provide services to S&T and FPS and OPEN.
Sounds like the stakes are pretty high here. A lot of defense going on here, and maybe all of you getting those weird robocalls like I have probably know due to world events. There's just a lot happening right now, so a lot at stake. So initially your team submitted a PIL one-pager. You wanted to be coached by the PIL. What were some of the reasons for that? What desired outcomes were you looking for?
So it's very important that we have capable vendors. Our vendors need to be able to react quickly to the changing face of cyber defense. It changes every day. The threats change every day. The tools change every day. So we have to be able to keep up, and a vendor has to have the experience to be able to keep up. We needed to make the award pretty quickly because we were approaching the end of the fiscal year and the end of our incumbent contract, and we didn't want to bridge and lose funding for the new contract. And so we needed to be really efficient in getting the evaluations done and getting the award made.
So buying something innovative requires innovative plays.
Absolutely.
Very good. David, I think we do have a poll up.
That's right. So this is one of the first poll questions we have for the day. So what is the minimum dollar threshold of a requirement for requesting coaching support from the PIL or a coach internal to your component? And we had 4 options here: 250,000, we had 750,000, 7.5 million, or there is no limit. And the answer there is D, correct. There is no limit. The only requirement there is that is a competitive action. Sole source actions, you just go make that award to the vendor that you're going to make the award to. So it just needs to be a competitive requirement. There is no dollar threshold minimum for actions to obtain that support.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Now moving on to slide number 9. It's time for us to go over the player perspective. Now this team, like I said, they submitted a one-pager and were expecting to be coached by a PIL coach. They were stepping into the lab, but then James showed up. So Stephanie, can you tell me a little bit about what you thought of some of those early engagements with James where he was the one actively working with your team and the PIL coach was just taking a back seat?
Sure. So, we were going into this planning our evaluation, and I had never been a technical evaluator before, but I had heard that it could be a painful process, and I did not want to do it. But I knew I had to at least get the contract ready to go, and even if someone else was going to be doing the evaluation. And we started meeting with James and with our procurement team and seeing what kind of options we had with the PIL and with innovations and oral presentations and on-the-spot consensus. And it was pretty exciting. I was excited, and then I was ready to be on the evaluation team and actually looking forward to, seeing how this would work in practice and seeing how it would go for us and putting it into action.
It's pretty incredible. You went from dreading it to actually wanting to be on the evaluation team. Well,
Yep.
I look forward to you being able to share more of your story on how that happened. Now, Jennifer, as the contract specialist, what were your thoughts on those initial engagements when you were being coached by one of your coworkers?
Well, we were really happy to work with James. It was we were able to immediately trust him. He knows our organization's culture and all the challenges we face, and he understands we have a nice and extensive approval process, and he knows our customers better. So I was really happy to be working with him. And also, we had only listed in our acquisition plan, I think it was 4 innovative techniques, and we knew we wanted to incorporate a lot more, and with his help, we'd be able to do that.
Very good.
And we did.
Awesome. That's interesting. It sounds like, James, your presence puts the team immediately at ease, and it also sounds like you have some pretty intimate knowledge of the review process in your office. So if you can't change it, I guess what? Navigate it?
Yep, handle it like a 1102.
Well, tell us a little bit about your perspective after these initial meetings with the team. So now you found out which team you're coaching, and you'd already signed up. There was no backing out now. So what were your thoughts on those initial interactions?
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you all. You were very kind. My initial thoughts, I think I was just excited to get in there a little bit. I think my first job as a policy analyst gave me a chance to get over the imposter syndrome a little bit by then. So by the time I got to be a coach, I was kind of enjoying it. It was no pressure, less pressure, I'll say, a little bit more grassroots. We were engaging with this team because the team actually wanted it. So I think I appreciated that. It gave us room to engage. And the benefit, I would also commend this program team for just being able to really define their requirement well. And even hearing Stephanie talk about being excited to use innovative methods, that definitely showed they were very invested in this process. And the same with the OAQ team that reached out for help. They were all brand new to a lot of these methods. So they were willing to experiment, to learn, to grow, and to just try new things. So it was honestly a great opportunity for me to have as my first official coaching experience.
Can you tell me a little bit about, so here you are out there coaching the team, you're coaching procurement innovation, something a PIL coach normally does. I was there to shadow you. How did that feel, having someone over your shoulder?
I think maybe, if you've met with some PIL coaches, they're not generally intimidating most of the time. So I may have been a little nervous at first just to make sure I got things right. But I think as we moved on, we really did realize that I may have had some insights that were meaningful to the conversation that maybe the PIL might not have been aware of. So I think those quickly became apparent. But it was nice having Sandra definitely on the call most of the time, especially for that exposure across DHS, how different teams have used methods. Definitely they have a lot of reach back there and helping us to navigate those issues.
Yeah, from what I remember, you were a little nervous from what I remember, but when a question came up about innovation, and you would just say, Sandra, can you jump in here? And I would. And then afterwards, I remember we would have kind of one-on-one meetings initially, like here's some feedback for you as a coach. And a lot of that feedback I can tell you was James, you know what you're doing. That's what I remember it being. And you really, I think you found your sea legs, so to speak, and you really took it from there because you did have a lot of good insights into what would be a good fit for this customer, what would be a good fit for this procurement office, and what would result in a successful procurement. So I'm glad you're able to share that today. For those out there, if you are a GS 1102, a contracting officer, contract specialist, or someone who's in a very closely related field, we're hoping that you want to also be a coach where you are, and we would like for you to be shadowed by a PIL coach so you can earn that level 2 DigiBadge. I can tell you what you're going to learn today is that James, he's not done. He is still coaching teams, and that's what we want. We want to build our community of innovators out there because we want to change culture. Now, if we move on to slide number 10, we're going to have another poll question up for you to answer. Let's talk about what this planning looked like, because I remember there was a lot of planning. You see James here jamming out. I promise he was not just jamming out to music, but like bands who create music, they get together and they have jam sessions. So James, can you tell us, what did these jam sessions look like? How many? How long were they? And were you all really just listening to music, or were you doing something else?
I kind of wish we were listening to music. These were probably where really a lot of the meat of the work was done. And they're called jam sessions, and I think people are familiar with that that term. If not, here we are. But this really, we took 1 to 2 hours, a couple hours each time we met, and it was really to hash out what the requirement is, and then especially how we want to evaluate it, what factors we want to use, how we want to split up the phases. All of those questions really were hammered out in those jam sessions. Because as you know, you probably hear me talk about this a lot, and hopefully most contracting officers, but the better you have your evaluation strategy planned and solidified up front, the smoother the rest of the process will be. And so I think that really showed in this procurement, because since we tried to put all that work up front before we encountered a lot of those challenges as they came along.
Now, Jennifer, as the contract specialist, what was your perspective on all of this early and often pre-solicitation planning that was led by James in these jam sessions?
Okay, so the jam sessions were amazing. They really were. They brought structure. They gave us a goal every week, and James also helped keep us on track. We decided to meet every week or every time it was scheduled, even if we didn't think we needed to, and in the end it was always productive and useful. He definitely provided guidance to the technical team on how to narrow down the requirements, and Stephanie can talk about that. And also on the scheduling, how to make the oral presentations flow. It was just really productive and also extremely collaborative with everybody attending. So we had the different stakeholders there, and I actually looked forward to it every time. It was really fun for me. And it worked well.
That's great. So it sounds like it's not like you were waiting for the full PR package before starting to collaborate with your customer and with your coach. Is that right?
Definitely. We were there all together through the whole thing, and everybody had their different strengths and weaknesses, and everybody participated. We had the main people there every week, the CO, CS, and the PM, and then the other stakeholders joined, and the attorney advisor. It was just really, really productive.
Wonderful. Those of you in the audience, can you share a time when you were excited to plan for a procurement? We would very much, giggling aside from our audience here, I'd love to hear from you. I mean, what was your best experience or most enjoyable when you were emailing collaboratively or when you were actually meeting with your contracting officer, your program office customer, and your attorney advisor and stakeholders all at once? Please let us know in the chat. Now finally, Stephanie, as the program office customer, tell us a little bit about who attended these jam sessions. We know they're only 1 to 2 hours long, and it sounds like you were talking a lot about procurement strategies, meaning like what are the evaluation factors. Who was there, and what was it like having them all there?
It was great because, you know, we had James as our coach, and we had Jennifer and Pam and our procurement team, our attorney advisor. I also had my branch chief and our security operations center chief were usually with us as well from my side of things, from the program office. And it was great because, you know, like Jennifer said, the collaboration, you can't beat it. And we could make sure that everyone felt comfortable with what we were doing, and that our attorney advisor felt comfortable with what we were doing, and everyone was on the same page about what we were going to be evaluating, how we were going to do it, and that it would be, you know, hopefully legally sufficient and hopefully not get protested, because we didn't want to get protested, of course. So, you know, having everyone in the same room, talking these things through, it was invaluable.
What was it like when this was competed 5 years ago?
Well, so when it was competed 5 years ago, that was 2016, it was a 4-3 compete because we had hit the ceiling. And it was written evaluations, and I think we did past performance evaluation, and then I think we did a technical and a management. And I was not the technical evaluator at that time. I did the past performance.
Oh, you managed to avoid being a technical evaluator.
I
5 years
did.
ago. Got it.
So, you know, I was going for the record and trying to avoid it for 3 contracts in a row, but I didn't make that record. So I did the past performance evaluation on the last one, and now that one was interesting because we only got one person competing. So, but we still had to go through the whole evaluation process, of course. So it wasn't super complicated, but it still took several weeks just to read one proposal and do one past performance, because we all had to read it, and then we all had to meet and discuss. And
Now, what did your pre-solicitation collaboration look like? Were you doing jam sessions 5 years ago?
no, we were not.
Oh, what did it look like?
Great question. We met with our OAQ team frequently.
That's your contracting officer?
Yes, we met with our contracting officer, our contract specialist, back in 2016, and we had a different team back then, and worked through what the evaluation questions were going to be, how long the proposals could be, all that stuff that went into written proposals, and then we put it out on the street.
A lot of email back and forth, it sounds like.
We did have a lot of meetings still in person.
I can tell you don't sound as excited about it though.
It was much drier, and we knew we were just trying to get through all the hoops we had to get through to get the contract awarded. And we knew we were going to get, long written proposals, and that's fine. That has its place. But for cyber defense, which, like you said earlier, innovative technology requires innovative procurement.
Yeah. Now, comments in the chat. We have many fans of James. So that was earlier in the chat. Lots of you have a fan club, James. You have a puppy who's following you right now. Now we have a lot of comments about, remember we had asked folks what kind of pre-solicitation plan did they most enjoy, and they admitted maybe it wasn't fun per se, but they most enjoyed the collaborative sessions. Vincent Brown here says, I don't know about being excited by it, but most productive when collaborating with the entire team, drafting criteria. Is that what this looked like? You were all literally one jam session at a time creating criteria as you went? Or was it, well, let's meet, and then one person has to write it all up and then email it?
No, it was as we went. I would go back to my program office SMEs and get their feedback on what kind of things they wanted us to evaluate, what was most important to them, what were they thinking was going to be most important in the next 5 years, how can we set vendors apart, great vendors apart from mediocre vendors. And then I would bring those thoughts to the jam sessions, and we would, hone things down to what was actually most important, what was going to give us the most information, and be the most valuable to us in terms of evaluating the vendors that ended up submitting proposals.
Very good, very good. Any final thoughts on these jam sessions before we move on?
It was nice
I
being
would
able
just say
to
that.
Go ahead, Jennifer. Go ahead.
No, I would just say that the working jam sessions where you're actually working on the document and, the on the spot and all that, they were the best, rather than going back and forth by email like we used to do or was done more often before.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You meet in person and you make the decision and it's done. When you're sending emails back and forth, you're sending the email and then you're waiting for the other person to read it, and then maybe they have to forward it to someone else, and it ends up taking significantly more time.
Yep. And what if they get 100 emails a day? They might just miss your email altogether. Yep. Very good. All right. So moving on to slide number 11. And yet we're still getting comments about how meeting in person really is the best. I did want to ask, this was last year. Was your team meeting in person, like in a building together, or were you using one of the online tools?
We were on Teams.
You're on Teams. Cameras on or off?
Usually on.
Oh.
A mix.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Depending on the day, how sick I was of looking at my own face. So.
Very good. Very good. True collaboration due to the technology that's become available to us. Now, for those following along separately, we're on slide 11. We are going to go over the poll results. David, take it away.
That's right. So how have your teams developed evaluation strategy on a procurement? And just like you're talking about jam sessions there, we have a bunch of different answers. Obviously, you guys could have just selected any that you wanted to. So we have 41 people that said over email with the core CO. We have, 21 people that said using jam sessions. So there are people out there that are using jam sessions,
Good.
not just online today. That's awesome. The contracting team develops them on their own. That's 10 people out there that answered that. It's about 11%.
So much pressure.
Just went up one. And then the next one is the program office, the program team develops them for the contracting team. So it looks like some people are out there doing that. 12 people have put it on there. And then we have 24 people that have never developed evaluation criteria. Some people have not been through the process that were in your shoes not too long ago, right?
And they're probably trying to avoid sitting on a technical evaluation panel until they heard this webinar. So those of you out there who are new, bring jam sessions to the table. It doesn't have to be brought to the table by just the contracting officer or just the customer or just the coach. Anyone can lead and facilitate a jam session. Now on slide number 11, here this is an overview of what the team ultimately decided to do. So you're in FAR 16.505, so you're issuing a task order. You chose a two-phase proposal process. Now, can one of you please talk us through what you're evaluating in phase 1 and then phase 2? What did the team decide?
So we decided to do the 2 phases, and in phase 1 we looked at their corporate experience case studies, and we had 3 case studies we requested, and we evaluated those using on-the-spot consensus and confidence ratings. And from that, we had 5 vendors submit, and we advised 2 to not move forward to phase 2, and we advised 3 to move forward to phase 2. And then in phase 2, we got down, into the technical nitty-gritty stuff and their management approach for the life of the contract. And that's when we got into oral presentations, and we still continue to use on-the-spot consensus and confidence ratings. Really loved that.
Very good. So you'll see phase 2 is a lot heavier. Phase 1 is a lot lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to dive into what case studies look like in phase 1. There was an advisory down select. And did all companies take the advice?
Yes, they did.
They did. So you down selected from 5 vendors in phase 1.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you're already doing better. Remember, 5 years ago, only 1 company bothered submitting a proposal. So here, the innovations have actually increased competition. So that's fantastic. Now with that, you've managed that increase by doing the advisory down select, 3 companies in phase 2. That sounds very sensible. For those of you on the phone, you'll notice phase 2 included an oral presentation for factor 2, then price was submitted in writing, and then finally a small business participation plan. Now we are in FAR 16.505. It's not that you would request a subcontracting plan, but I did want to encourage you to attend our OSDBU trainings. There are plenty of OSDBU trainings available for you to register for on CSOD in order to learn about when a subcontracting plan is required and when maybe you can ask for goals. We have some great trainings, so please be sure to sign up. Now, if we move on to slide number 12, we're going to dive right into this new technique called case studies. Now, case studies were introduced roughly a year ago. Do you remember when that happened by chance? Where were you in this process?
I think I was watching the PIL webinar on case studies because I think you suggested it, Sandra. We look at case studies, and I joined the webinar, and we decided to move forward.
That's true. We just had some brand new coaches join the PIL who came from outside of DHS, and we're bringing some new innovations into DHS. So case studies are this more refined and focused way for vendors to be able to talk about some of their previous experience. Now do note, this factor is evaluating corporate experience and not past performance. Experience is like your resume. Past performance, that's like when you call your references. And because of the part of the FAR we're in, this team decided past performance was not needed. But did the team just walk into the jam session and say, hey, I just saw a webinar, I want to use case studies? Is that what it looked like?
No, we were talking about doing a past performance as our phase 1 evaluation. And when we were having those discussions in our jam sessions with James, and Sandra was there as well, Sandra recommended that we consider case studies instead as a way to, you still sort of see what kind of experience they've had in the past, but you get a lot more detail. And it gave us more insight into how they had actually gotten that experience and how they had done it in the past.
Right. So normally I think a lot of teams, when they evaluate experience, they either ask for 3 previous contracts, hey, give me a description. But because you were buying something so new and innovative, you needed more.
Mm-hmm.
What were some elements of the more that you were asking for in these case studies?
So we wanted to make sure that the case studies were relevant to what we were doing, and that they were pretty recent because cyber defense is constantly evolving. Everything's on fire all of the time. So we have to be able to put those fires out, and we have to do it quickly. So we wanted to make sure that these vendors understood what we were doing and understood the overarching principles that, govern cyber defense day to day, and that they could manage those pieces well, and that they had done so successfully in the past.
Very good. I remember, I think I've seen, and we'll see the solicitation in a minute, you wanted to know the size of the organizations they supported. I think I remember you asked for things like, how quickly they had to do certain things. They were pretty specific,
yeah,
from what I remember. Okay. Now, the question, only 6 pages written. Sounds very manageable, but how did you come to only 6 pages?
So we asked for 3 case studies from each vendor, and we estimated that it would take about 2 pages to write up those case studies for each question. I believe we let vendors, divide that how they wanted. So if they only wanted to spend 1 page on a case study, they could spend 3 on another, or however they wanted to do it. But we kind of have the belief that if you know what you're doing, you can explain something succinctly. And if you don't know what you're doing, then you're probably going to talk a lot more and use a lot of words and maybe not say as much that's meaningful.
So you weren't looking for a novel.
No.
You wanted, if a company knew what they were doing in this very innovative field, they could very quickly. Now, was that the case, real quick, from what you saw? Were the responses to things? Good.
Yes, it was the case.
Good. Good. Well, now let's move on to slide number 13 and take a look at what the case studies were and what was in the solicitation. Now, those of you who've attended a PIL boot camp, you will know that the tan boxes, this is actual solicitation language. And this is the language for what was expected in the case studies. This is only some of it, though. If you want to see everything that was in the solicitation when asking for case studies, please go to the downloads box and download this team solicitation. Now, so we have the procedures here. It tells vendors you must provide 3 relevant case studies. And you came up with 3 case studies. Was this something that you walked into the jam sessions and you just told James, hey, I already know what we want to do? Or was this a process, trying to figure out what the right case studies would be?
This was a bit of a process because, every SME in our program office, has things that they value, especially for their program. But what we really wanted to look at with case studies was the big picture and what they would be able to do overall. And so we got a lot of feedback on, we have, I think, like a list of 10 things we were looking at, and we narrowed it down to these 3. And these 3, running a CSP program, using a SOAR tool at a large organization, and tuning a SIM solution at a large organization. These 3 things sort of drive what we do every day. And so we needed a vendor that could use those things and use them successfully, efficiently, and had done it before in order to make the best decision.
Now, things not just done it before. I see in case study number 1 here, we have a summary. You were looking for very specific experience at DHS or Department of Defense. I mean, that's pretty specific. Was there a reason for that specificity?
So the cybersecurity service provider program started with DoD, I think 15, 20 years ago. And so they had been doing it for a while. And DHS decided we were going to create our own version back in about 2019. And so ICE created that program for DHS. We were the first cybersecurity service provider in DHS. And so really DHS and DoD are the only departments really doing that. There's a couple other outliers that do it as well under DoD. CIS is expanding it as well, but those 2 agencies are where you're going to see the most experience with that.
Okay. And then your final 2 case studies, Greek to me, but I do recognize the words at the very end of each of those sentences. Do this thing. Have you done it, your experience doing it at a large organization? I'm guessing that's because ICE is pretty big and you are a service provider, and I'm guessing these things are just very important, cybersecurity defense.
Yeah, the size of the organization is going to drive how many events and incidents you see on a regular basis. A smaller organization is just not going to be dealing with the same volume of events as an organization the size of ICE. And so if a vendor didn't, had only had experience with an organization that had like 5,000 users, it just wasn't going to match what they were going to have to do for ICE. And we couldn't get enough confidence that they would be able to manage the volume at ICE.
Got it. Now, if you look on the lower right-hand side, this solicitation language, this is the actual language for case study number 3. So it's from the solicitation. They ask vendors, describe experience operating and tuning a STEAM solution within a large organization. Then it goes on to say the case study should include, or it should cover, data aggregation, security, data analytics, cyber threat intelligence. So it sounds like you didn't want a shiny brochure. You wanted to know very specific things about their experience with very specific elements of what you needed.
Yes.
Very good. Now, James, as a coach, now are you a cyber defense expert?
I am not.
Okay. Well, now, so how were you? How were you as a coach? And Stephanie just told us that she walked in not really knowing, exactly what to evaluate. How did you, as a coach, pull all this together to where the team could focus and figure out what is the most discriminatory evaluation criteria for phase 1?
Yeah, good question. I think this is actually one of the parts that I might also get a little more excited about because as a coach or even as a contracting officer, it gives me a chance to gut all the previous archaic and or bureaucratic processes that have existed in a lot of my career in procurement. So for me, yeah, it allows you to have that conversation with the program to elicit that buy-in. One of the things I often recommend people ask their programs and teams are, what are your pain points? What are the areas you've struggled with in the past? And why don't we evaluate new vendors hinging on those aspects rather than, on a scale of 1 to 10, how did somebody do on, such and such? So finding a way for that evaluation to be meaningful, I think is really important. And so once you ask those questions of the program, you'll find out that they'll quickly bring up all the areas that they're struggling with, what they want to see in a new vendor. And it's kind of just about crafting those into valid questions, whether I might be able to understand it myself or not.
Wow. So I guess the takeaway here for our audience, if they're thinking about coaching but are concerned, I mean, I'm no cyber defense expert either, but it sounds like your role as a coach has nothing to do with being a specialist in what they're buying. It's really in helping the team and facilitating the discussion. Was that how it felt, Stephanie? Because you had, like you said, ended up with a big list. Because your team, what was it like having James there and helping your team really narrow down to what was important?
Well, I think it all goes back to the collaboration. James is the expert in, procurement innovation, and Jennifer and Pamela are the experts in procurement, and I'm the expert in cyber defense. And we all have to work together to meet this singular goal of awarding this contract. And so we all have, valuable information to share that, we're working together as a group to get it out there and get it all working together to get to where we need to be.
Very good. Now, there is some interaction in the chat. Folks are very, very interested in downloading your solicitation. And for those out there who are struggling with the downloads, PIL team members are putting instructions in the chat. And if you ask them, they can email you that solicitation directly. So thank you all for being so engaged. Now it's time for us to move on to slide number 14. All right, so you received the 6 pages from 5 vendors. All right, 5 times it was 30 pages to evaluate. What did your evaluation look like? Did everyone just, because you're all at home, did you all just sit there quietly and evaluate by yourselves, or did you use good old Microsoft Teams again?
We used good old Microsoft Teams. So Jennifer would send us, I think in the order they arrived, she sent us the packages from the vendors. We would read it, usually individually, and then we would get on Teams, throw it up on the screen so we could talk about it, look through it, and then we would do our on-the-spot consensus.
What did that look like? What does that mean, do an on-the-spot consensus?
So on-the-spot consensus, we went around and we said, this thing they stated increased my confidence, this decreased my confidence, and for each we explained why.
High, some are low confidence.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we reached at the end, we looked at everything that increased and decreased our confidence, and we reached a overall confidence rating for the vendor, and we use that to make our advisory down select.
All right. So you've come together, you read together, you voted together, you had good discussion. Then what did you do?
So we wrote it down into the evaluation document, and we, put in the details into those sort of bullet points. This increased my confidence because it shows that they understand SOAR, or it shows they understand SIM, or they have extensive experience as a CSD, or it decreased my confidence because, you know, they've only managed a SOAR tool at a small organization, or whatever the reason may be. We elaborated on those, and then we had our final vote on our overall confidence rating, and, you know, created those consensus documentation for review.
Who did the writing? Who actually wrote that document?
I did.
You did. And were you sharing screen, or were you?
Yes.
You were, okay, so you were sharing, you were doing a screen share of your Word document. Bullet points were going up on the, we had one person in charge of putting the bullet points up there. You're still in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's like, yep, here's my bullet points, and Stephanie, she's quickly typing 100 words a minute. And everyone can see the bullet points, so everyone's in agreement. So it's not like you copied and pasted from anyone else's work. I mean, no one else was doing individual evaluation reports, it sounds like. They may have taken some personal notes. Yep, that's it. Very good. It sounds very efficient.
It was, and I mean, our team was made up of SMEs from each area of cyber defense. So we had people that had some very specialized information they could offer as well.
Okay. How many days did this take?
3.
Wow. That's very quick. That seems quick anyway. Was this quick for your team?
It was. You know, we had to take them out of their kind of day-to-day jobs to get this done, and so we wanted to get them back to their day jobs as quickly as we could. And so we were able to do about 2 a day, and, you know, we only had 5, so 3 days we were about done. I spent a few more days with our attorney advisor.
Is it because you were the chairperson of
Yes.
the technical evaluation team? Okay.
Yes.
Now, so you met separately with the attorney advisor. What were you all talking about?
We were revising language to make sure it was technically sufficient or legally sufficient, you know, in order to, you know, make sense to vendors when they got to see it at the end, and making sure that we had hit all the points we needed to. We had clearly defined what increased confidence and what decreased confidence, and why we reached the confidence rating we reached.
Now, I want to ask, every team is different. Sometimes the attorney advisor is there for on-the-spot consensus, and sometimes they do what your team did. The chairperson goes to the attorney advisor. Now, was this an email exchange, or did you have actual meetings with your attorney to go over your documentation?
We had meetings. We were on teams as well, and we would go through and, you know, figure out word choice and, you know, rewrite stuff as needed. And, you know, she would explain legal stuff to me, and I could explain cyber defense stuff to her, and we, you know, we got through it. So
your attorney advisor wasn't doing a technical evaluation with you. She stayed in her swim lane of legal sufficiency.
Yeah.
Whereas you were in your swim lane of, this is important. You know, this is the technical side.
Yep.
Very good. Have you been through this process before at all, where you dealt with one-on-one with an attorney advisor?
I don't believe so.
No? No?
I don't think I had to do that back in 2016 for a past performance review. So.
Okay. And James, as a coach, did you have a role in any of this on-the-spot consensus and documentation?
Yeah, especially toward the beginning, I wanted to make sure they were familiar and comfortable with the process. So I definitely called in for as many as I could, and let the technical team be free to do what they needed to do. I didn't require that I be present for everything, but I tried to be there as much as I could. And then whenever they had questions, they knew easily how to get in touch with me.
And the evaluators, did they understand, they just, oh yeah, we've been to PIL webinars, we know how to use confidence ratings? Was it like that, or was there some teaching and prep required to get everyone ready?
I think we prepped them a little bit. You know, they're all technical SMEs, and they hadn't been as involved in the day-to-day solicitation preparation as I had and our SOC chief had. So, you know, they were coming in a little blind, but we did do training and got them ready to go, and sort of went over what we were doing and how we were doing it and how it was different from ones they may have participated in the past.
And I think some of these folks were already in the jam sessions anyway for the planning,
Yes.
right? So then before solicitation was released, you did the really hands-on training. It's like, look, this is what confidence ratings looks like. This is what on-the-spot consensus looks like. Very good. So done before release of solicitation. Very important to get that planning in. Very good. All right. So moving on, we are going to move on to slide number, where are we? 15. Time for some vendor feedback on case studies. Now, for those who have engaged with the PIL, maybe you do or maybe you don't know, after an award is made on a project in the PIL, us PIL coaches reach out to all the vendors and ask, hey, you okay with a 30-minute phone conversation? We want to know how the innovations affected you, the vendors. Here's what they had to say about case studies.
All right, so we have 3 quotes here from 3 different vendors. And so vendor 1 here says, it showed us exactly where we've done this in the past.
Effective because we knew what you were looking for and we wrote to that.
That's right. And then the last one said, I think ICE did a good job of making sure the experience the offer provided delivered a similar service offering or that they had subscribers under their operation.
Now I want to ask, in practice, as an evaluator, did this work the way you thought it would work, the proposal for the case study?
For the most part, yes. I think we could have improved how we described case studies in the solicitation. I think there was maybe some confusion either from our wording or I'm not sure if vendors weren't familiar with case studies yet since they're pretty new. Because some stuff sort of ended up as a past performance summary and, we didn't count that against them, but maybe refining that language would help us in the future.
So maybe they didn't quite give you as much as you thought they'd be giving you. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, had there been a draft solicitation release? Jennifer, do you recall, was there a draft solicitation released?
Yes, we released a draft solicitation.
And did it? Okay.
Shortly before, it didn't give them a whole lot of time, and we also released an RFI earlier in the year.
Okay, and that's okay. You'll see in a moment the timeline here, this was in the 4th quarter, and the draft solicitation, I think it was pretty close to when the solicitation was going to be released. I think learning forward, the recommendation is release multiple drafts before the release of that solicitation. Maybe that could have been the opportunity had you had a little bit more time, not just releasing the draft requirements document, but also releasing the procedures you were going to use. That could have given vendors at least a moment to stop and think and ask questions about case studies. So that is something, a learning forward moment for next time, I think. But it was the 4th quarter. And as we all know, there's a lot going on in the 4th quarter. So it's okay for us to learn forward. Now moving on to slide number 16, and I do believe a new poll question is coming up. Here, we're going to talk here about the acquisition timeline. Remember, this team also wanted this to be an efficient procurement. So let's see how they're doing so far. So on July 15th, the solicitation was released, and exactly 1 week later, those case study proposals were due. Now, if we go to the light blue letter C, we're almost 4 weeks away now on August 18th. That is when the advisory down select letters were issued. Now I have to ask, Stephanie, you just told me, it took your evaluation team only 3 days to evaluate and document those phase 1 case studies, which I'm sure they loved. They got back to their day job. Now you as the lead work with the attorney advisor to finalize. But this is a 3-week gap. Now, were you really working 3 weeks with your attorney to finalize, or was there something else happening here in this gap?
So we were working with our attorney advisor for part of that time, getting the down selects made, the decisions made, the letters written. We were also finalizing our phase 2.
Whoa, whoa, you had to finalize phase 2. What, James? What were you still finalizing for phase 2?
Oh, I had no part in this. No. Yeah, I think what this will come up in probably lessons learned, but there was some structure that we may have not considered fully beforehand, or in my own efforts, maybe I tended to be a little too go with the flow from the beginning, whereas we hit a couple of roadblocks that I may have not fully expected. And I think the biggest one of all was just finalizing that oral presentation schedule and the time allowed, how much time we want to allow for each, but then all of the policy, legal, technical concerns around those aspects as well just kind of all came to the surface.
Yeah. So I think when I recall seeing the solicitation, there was a draft schedule for oral presentations I guess you were thinking, oh, well, let's just get the solicitation out and we'll have a quick jam session about this later.
Yeah.
But the challenge here is your evaluators just spent 3 days evaluating, and they're done. They're back at their day jobs. They probably didn't realize they had to set aside more time to sort out the oral presentation schedule. And more than that, Jennifer, since this is just now getting finalized, were you able to just roll with what you finalized, or did that have to go through your reviews the way your solicitation went through reviews?
Well, we did have to go through the review process, and also remember it was a year end. At the same time, we had warned our vendors that the turnaround time would be very, very short for the phase 2 presentations.
Okay.
So I think it worked, but we can definitely improve in the future.
And Jane,
also
go ahead.
the schedule was really to their benefit, which we'll talk about later, but the
Yep.
schedule worked out much better.
Well, I'm glad of that. So it sounds like the jam session to finalize the oral presentation schedule was worth it. Lesson learned, I hadn't even thought of that, but that's something, local culture, James, that, like you said, it's already a lesson learned. It's like, of course, the solicitation has to go through reviews before being released. Maybe next time you'll have one last jam session to finalize the oral presentation schedule before releasing that solicitation. That way everything can be reviewed the one time.
Yeah, I think just being aware more of what each party's concerns are, of course, will allow us going forward to bring those up front and not more last minute.
Yeah. Now, I do want to commend the team. The vendors were already on notice that things would be pretty quick from when they would get their advisory letter to when those phase 2 oral presentations would begin. Because if you look at the time from C to D, that's from August 18th to August 30th, and that's less than 2 weeks. And that's pretty tight from what we normally recommend. But remember, we're in the 4th quarter. A lot of moving parts here, some unexpected delays when it came to that jam session after release of solicitation, and that's okay. This team learned forward, and they're going to be better prepared for this year's 4th quarter for sure. All right. Yeah, we do have a comment from John Walls. From current experience, it is very, very important to plan ahead for potential pitfalls. We plan the best we can. And James, you were such a trooper. You were like, well, I'm not perfect, but I'm ready. Let's go. And you went, and it's like, oh, well, that didn't quite work the way I thought it would. So that's okay. You pushed forward, and the team pushed forward. And as you see, you will see on the next page, an award was made. Let's continue on with our story. And do please remember to answer the poll at the bottom of the page, because David is about to go over poll results.
All right, that's exciting. All right, in a multi-phase solicitation, when is the best time to develop the second phase schedule and requirements? So we just heard.
Let's see if everyone got the right answer. They heard the answer. Let's see if they got it.
All right, so we had 52 people. 62% said prior to releasing the solicitation. So
well done. Bravo.
Right.
Bravo.
But we do have 33 people, 35% that said during phase 1 of the solicitation. So we do have some people.
They're actively changing their mind. That's good.
And we have one person that said between the phases of the solicitation.
They went to get coffee. That's okay.
Yeah, and no one said after phase 1 is complete.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Very good. So the lessons are sticking for everyone else. This is wonderful.
Yeah, that's right.
This is wonderful. All right. So now, some learning forward. So the to-do list for phase 2, it was write those letters, finalize the oral presentation schedule. Gosh, even oral presentation rules of engagement, it sounds like that was still up in the air too. Now, what is this 3rd bullet? What else needed to be finalized, James?
Yeah, definitely Stephanie will have more fun details on that.
This is pretty important.
What was it? Yeah, this was important to us because the point of oral presentations was to get some of that engagement with the vendor. So figuring out what we wanted to ask them and when we wanted to ask them were both very important things to kind of get a feel for their experience in the field, but also how they would operate on the contract. So yeah, the concerns were when to ask them the questions and what to ask. And so since we didn't release all of the questions with the solicitation, with the purpose of them being on the spot, we had some time to develop and form them, which took a little more time.
Now let's pause here to make sure our audience is with us. So on the spot questions, these are the ones that are asked of every vendor. So every vendor gets the same questions. They're asked during the oral presentations. They're not put in the solicitation, so it's not like these vendors have time to plan what their answer is going to be. Now, did they know the questions were coming at all?
Yes, we did say in the solicitation that on-the-spot questions would be asked.
Well, then it's a good thing you follow through to plan some. That's good.
We did something.
Very good, and that's okay. Now, we do have a foul on the play, as we've already mentioned. Remember your evaluators, they were like, yay, 3-day evaluation, I'm gone, bye, see you at oral presentations. Had to pull them into a jam session. Then it was like, oh, whoops, got to go through the approval process. So I think we've already discussed the lesson learned here. Maybe we just get this settled before solicitations release. And how long did it take to come up with what those on-the-spot questions were going to be? What do you recall?
Again, I think we had a lot of ideas, and it was about refining what was going to get us the most useful information, what was reasonable to ask them to respond to on the spot, and what we could actually evaluate based on what they could answer on the spot. Because we weren't letting them, go back to their computers or get on Google or anything like that to find an answer. They had to do it right there.
Very good. And so next time maybe we just take a timeout and regroup and do this planning, finalize those questions. I think in your case you were fortunate in that you had on-the-spot questions to ask. Mm-hmm. And it could be accidentally in the future, if this planning wasn't done, it could be, well, gosh, I'm so tired, it's the fourth quarter, we're all so busy, no time for a jam session, right? Then what would the team do? So planning is everything. High quality planning is everything. But I think you're all going to be ready this fourth quarter. And everyone in our audience is going to be ready too. All right, on to our next slide. So following along, we're on slide number 18 now. Jennifer, you're first up. So what we have here, we're in phase 2, and we're really just focusing on factor 2, which is evaluating both technical approach and management approach. We have 2 elements here, not sub-factors, just elements. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about what virtual meeting platform you used, how long these oral presentations were, what did they look like?
Sure. We used Microsoft Teams, and we tested it out a week ahead of time with each vendor, and we did not record, and we had a note taker. But I really think the schedule was to everyone's benefit. It gave the vendor flexibility. We had allowed for technical in the morning with up to 3 hours for the vendor, including their prep time on the spot, and up to an additional 45 minutes for the government caucus and questions. And in the afternoon, we allowed up to 1 hour for the vendor, including the on-the-spot questions, and plus 30 minutes for the government caucus and questions. We made sure each vendor had the same exact amount of time, and I thought the schedule worked very well.
Now the schedule, I couldn't get the schedule on the slide. I'll be honest, it was a pretty long schedule. It spanned the morning and the afternoon. Now, as an evaluator, Stephanie, did you feel all that time was needed? Was it the right amount of time, or would you do it a little differently next time?
We asked a lot of questions out of our oral presentation.
So a lot of dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And
good.
A lot of time the vendors spent speaking, but it was a very long day for the vendors and for the evaluation team because, even once the vendors were done, we had to meet for on-spot consensus and do that documentation. So I think our lesson learned was don't do a full day of oral presentations, maybe half a day or less. We had a lot of information we really felt we needed to get, but I think we probably could have honed it down further to have a more concise, shorter day for everyone.
So it sounds like based on the presentation itself, you didn't necessarily need every element that was presented in the end.
No.
Okay. What do you think you'll do next time? James, as a coach, what would you advise this team to do next time?
I think like what Stephanie said, the more important thing is probably that you don't need as much time as you think. And to draft to
release a draft solicitation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely release more of that draft solicitation. And Jen hit on this earlier, was to increase that vendor engagement up front. Any chance you get that consistently seems to be vendor feedback on any procurement. It's really helpful to get them involved in the process so you have a better idea of, the mission area you're working in.
Good point. PIL webinar number 59 was entitled face your fears. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone or something along those lines. And it was a team that they did a lot of pre-solicitation, talking back and forth with vendors. And I remember one of those questions asked was, how do you want to be evaluated? And even something like this, if you all out there are formulating oral presentation schedules and you're wondering if it's the right size, does it really need to be a full day? Maybe it needs to be a half day. If you're not sure and you're pre-solicitation, release that question to vendors. Go ahead and put it on SAM.gov and say, hey, this is our draft of the oral presentation schedule. This is what we want to evaluate. Give us your thoughts. I guarantee you vendors will be happy to give you some input. At this point, a lot of vendors have done virtual oral presentations. And I think it's an untapped resource that's available to us that we don't even think of using. We think we're not allowed to, but we really are. Let's use that resource because we're all busy and it's the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So let's put it on the vendors.
I was going to say also as a coach, I think the benefit or what I would hope to do is to try and remove a lot of the fear, like Sandra said, around the entire process of developing your requirement, engaging with the end users, engaging with the vendors. There's a lot of room for that and a lot of growth for that. I think there's always this implicit fear of everybody in government that you're going to get in trouble for something that you don't know about, but there is a lot of flexibility allowable to you to help find a better solution.
Wonderful. Good words of advice, James. Now, on these on-the-spot questions, remember you spent all that time in that one last jam session to plan them. It's time to see what they look like. Now these, again, you have a lot of on-the-spot questions. Can you walk us through, maybe perhaps Jennifer, it makes sense. Can you walk us through how these were, when and how these were provided to the vendors on that oral presentation day?
Sure. So we did try to give the vendors flexibility in the morning on the technical. We provided an on-the-spot scenario and questions at the very start of the day, and then we gave them the flexibility to decide in which order they wanted to answer. So some vendors went ahead and met right away to figure out how to answer the question and then came back to us, and some vendors waited. So we did give them that flexibility. And then in the afternoon, the technical on-the-spot, the management on-the-spot questions were asked without allowing any prep time, so they just had to answer it at the time they were asked.
Now, the actual questions asked in that afternoon on management approach, I'm gonna read one of them here. The first one, how will you keep positions staffed and vacancies backfilled when personnel leave and limit time vacancies are unfilled, especially for firm fixed price clients? How do you ensure personnel is qualified and can onboard quickly? I see your second, so you interrupted them at the end. You were like, hey, here's your on-the-spot question. And they had to think on their feet to answer?
Yep.
How did that go?
It went pretty well. We were concerned, this has been a pain point for us. Staffing a 24/7 shop is difficult, especially staffing people who want to work overnight.
Is this here in the DC area?
It is not. It's in Arizona near Phoenix.
Oh.
So a more limited pool of personnel as well. And we can't just like not have staff on shift. We can't miss a shift. So it's very important to us that a vendor can staff appropriately, has a bench ready to go to get people, if someone leaves, that they can backfill quickly.
I see the other questions literally get to that. The next question asks, what are your retention strategies for keeping these people?
Yep.
Have them want to work for your company. And your final is how will you recruit qualified professionals, particularly in the Chandler, Arizona area, where there may be a smaller pool of qualified applicants? So that's a lot of pressure on the spot for vendors to be able to answer to that.
Yep.
So what were some of the answers from the vendors who didn't do so great in answering these questions?
They were pretty generic. They were, well, we use Indeed.com, or we, constantly interview people, which is all, it's fine, but, the vendors that actually had experience doing this and had plans in place and were familiar with staffing 24/7 operations, whether with us or someone else, knew what those challenges were and knew how to specifically address them and had plans for doing so.
And they were able to answer on the spot.
Yes.
And how do they, can you tell me? How do they staff in a place like this?
So they look for people who want to work night shifts. You might have parents who are splitting childcare so they don't have to pay for it. People who are in school during the day but want to work at night. They look for people who specifically want to work night shift. Is one way that they do it. They keep people EOD'd, even if they're not active on the contract, so that they can move in quickly if a vacancy opens. They go to colleges, they go to other types of recruiting fairs, and then they cross-train people within the company, so people can step in if needed as well. So
That's very well planned and well thought out.
Yep.
Yet the vendor didn't know this question was coming.
Yep.
So that means it sounds like you had high confidence in what you heard.
Yes.
That they weren't just making it up on the spot.
Yep.
Very good. Now, do you think that had this been a written proposal where the company wrote about their technical approach and their management approach, do you think you would have had this level of confidence in their ability to really recruit and retain in a place like Arizona?
No. We would have gotten, the canned corporate write-up of how they recruit, how they retain, and probably be pre-written and given to every agency for every contract. And we wouldn't have gotten a picture into what they actually do. When you put someone on the spot, you can see if they actually know or if they're kind of making it up on the fly. And this is kind of it was an important question, but it wasn't so technically detailed that they wouldn't have been able to answer it appropriately on the spot.
I would argue that these questions give you good insight into that vendor's culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if their culture is one that's used to having to staff 24/7 facilities, they're already doing things that they're succeeding.
Yeah.
It sounds like those other vendors, maybe, even though they did well in the case studies, maybe this was one area where they just, on the fly, they couldn't go to Google and say how to staff 24 hours, right? There was no phone a friend here. You had to know. So that's good. It sounds like that was a good outcome, being able to answer these questions on the spot. And they were the same for each vendor.
Yeah.
And this is separate from the back and forth dialogue that you had with vendors. This was, this was completely different, but it was still during the oral presentation session. I have one last question for you. You're talking about staffing. Did you evaluate key personnel resumes?
We did not.
Why?
Because we have a lot of key personnel on our program, but we understand that key personnel resumes are not binding.
Well, hold on. I want to ask our audience, as you're talking about that, you did not evaluate key personnel resumes. Let me know in the chat. Are you out there evaluating key personnel resumes, and why? I really want to know why, because you're about to hear the reason for why not to evaluate key personnel resumes. So Stephanie, why not evaluate key personnel resumes?
So key personnel are great. We love our key personnel, and we want to have highly qualified people, and we had qualifications written into the statement of work.
Okay, so the statement of work says, hey, when you hire key personnel, they have to do these things. They have to be, okay.
Yep.
Got it. All right, let's keep going. I'm still waiting.
And we asked them as part of our solicitation to bring specific key personnel to the oral presentation.
Okay.
To do part of the presentation.
Okay.
But at the same time, we knew vendors were out there like trying to steal from the incumbent and do all kinds of stuff to get the greatest person to be a proposed key personnel in the oral presentation. And, we can't guarantee that that person has any intent to actually stay or will actually be on our contract.
Now, hold on. There are some folks out there who say, oh, but I asked the vendor to give me the letter of intent of this key personnel person to take the job. And usually it's on procurements that from solicitation to award are over 6 months. I mean, I want you all to think about that out there. Put yourself in their shoes. Would you wait over 6 months for a job and not get a better offer from another job in that 6 months? I mean, really. We're asking vendors here to hold off and say, hey, yep, we promise you these people, and who knows when you'll make an award, but yeah, we'll promise them. I appreciate that your team really thought this out. Was this something that you knew you didn't want, or is this something that came up in one of your jam sessions with your coach?
I think it came up in a jam session because we started out saying we had every single person on the contract as key personnel.
Oh.
And that was about 50 people. And every vendor came back to us and asked what on earth we were thinking. So we scaled back the number of key personnel we had to being the team leads for these specific task areas under the contract. And so those team leads were key personnel. We set specific requirements education, contracting, or certifications, experience in the statement of work. And if key personnel leave or are replaced, then, I have to evaluate the submitted resume and make sure that they meet the requirements or waiver them so the person can be key personnel. And that was enough for us because we wanted to see the resume for the people we're actually going to get, not the people that are going to be in the oral presentation and may or may not actually work on the contract.
We do have a person in the chat who's commented on, how can we ensure that when we lose these key personnel resources, that good ones come back? And I think what I appreciate is your team, you didn't just say no key personnel or yes key personnel. You talked about it. You actually had all the stakeholders at the table to decide what makes the most sense for the market you're in. A lot of thought was put into it. Now, I'm not saying that you should never, ever evaluate key personnel. There may be special situations where it makes a lot of sense. At the very least, have a jam session to talk about it and really talk it through and talk to vendors. Vendors will tell you, do you want to see a really great resume that they downloaded off of Indeed.com? Or, like this team, would you rather just want to know, how do you hire? How do you find the highly qualified people that we need for this procurement? And it sounds like going the other route of actually asking, how do you hire? How do you hire in Arizona? How do you staff something 24/7 that gave you more value than simply seeing resumes? Yeah. Very good. Very good. Great takeaway. Great comments in the chat about this.
Yeah, the other thing I'd add, listen, if you want me to complain about something, it'll be about evaluating key personnel. I would differentiate the difference between having key personnel and using them as part of your evaluation, because usually people think it's an all or nothing, which it definitely isn't. And if you are a GAO report nerd like I am, the most annoying thing you'll see is the amount of government mistakes in evaluating key personnel. And I think what really set me off years ago was, saying that we require 10 years of experience, but one key personnel proposed has only 8, and somebody awarded to them, and then we lost the protest over that. I'm just thinking of the waste of resources and frustration, all because of, with something that was totally preventable. And so that's usually it just doesn't seem to bring benefit in an evaluation.
In evaluation, I'm glad you emphasized that. Now, you can have key personnel in your requirement. Hey, once this thing's awarded, you got to provide these key personnel with this experience. But in the evaluation, it doesn't make a lot of sense to evaluate the resumes. Evaluate how they recruit and find these people, how quickly they find them, how they retain them, what's the strategy. Sounds like there's high value in that. And thank you for making that very clear. Moving on, slide number 19. Here's the full schedule. Here's the outcome. Award was made in 76 days. And I got to say, this was no small feat being in the final quarter of the fiscal year. It is literally July, August, September. Now, you made it. Congratulations. Now, we've already explained the gaps. And again, we have excellent lessons learned on how to mitigate those in the future. Now, vendor feedback on the entire evaluation process. Vendor, David, you're not a vendor. David, what does one vendor have to say?
Yes, it's a very fast turnaround between draft and final solicitation. Extend the time a little bit.
Have more engagement with industry. I think that's already a lesson learned, and that's okay. Here's what they said. We want to partner with agencies that have that dialogue too. We love the exchange and partnership that comes with this. Any kind of industry communication would be helpful. And folks, I did see earlier, Monica from the PIL did post a link to that webinar about facing your fears and talking to industry. Do please check it out.
Yep, and the last one we have in here is the tactics and innovations were great. It streamlines acquisitions and helps in making decisions.
And I can share with you, oftentimes these shorter timelines for vendors, it saves them a lot of money. So they like it for many different reasons, and that is one of those. Now finally, to start wrapping up, Coach James, any final thoughts or words of wisdom or just comments about your experience in being a procurement innovation coach at your home agency?
Yes. In summary, it's doable. I think you have people that will support you, especially the PIL and in your own office that can support you in this. I think like we mentioned before, a huge lesson learned is just making sure you stick to a little bit of structure. You don't have to be overly structured. This is more a point for me I tend to prefer a go with the flow, but there is a benefit to having meetings on the calendar or agreed upon times and goals that will help you get where you need to be. And lastly, I'd say coming into something like this to come in with the expectation that you're dealing with many different people with different expectations that communicate differently, that all come from different technical backgrounds, and to expect some hiccups along the way, some frustrations, because I know it's easy to get pretty impatient and frustrated with a lot of things in government. So to just know that when you're coming into these things.
Very good. Thanks, James. Now moving on to our final slide. Final post-game analysis. Stephanie, would you go first?
You know, the PIL was invaluable to us, and using these innovation techniques helped us get this contract awarded, get it awarded quickly, get it awarded by the deadline of the end of the fiscal year, and, you know, use the funding we had available to the best of, you know, to meet our needs the best we could without having to do long bridges. So it made the evaluation much quicker and much more efficient, and, you know, I look forward to doing more with it in the future.
Wonderful. Yeah, you had a pretty, sounds like you had a pretty fun first experience evaluating. Yeah. Good. Jennifer, any final takeaways as a contract specialist?
No, just what everybody has been saying. The jam sessions were really invaluable, and having the PIL coach and the collaboration among this team was amazing, with everybody really invested in the outcome. And I was really happy to be part of this team. And also, I do agree that we should have a little bit more industry engagement earlier with another draft solicitation going out.
Very good. That's why you were in the lab. You were testing. Very good. Now I'm going before you, James, because I was not the coach for this procurement. My takeaway is James did a fantastic job. I can tell you I kind of sat back and watched as he led brainstorming sessions, led jam sessions, and I got to tell you, his knowledge, his intimate knowledge of the procurement culture was very, very important. And this team quickly trusted him. And so, James, congratulations. I look forward to seeing what you do in the future as you coach teams. And finally, James, final takeaways.
Thank you all. Yeah, I think we hit on some of those main takeaways, and my recommendation would be to find a great procurement team that you can work with. And I'm half joking, but also I think as you build those collaboration muscles, those teams that you thought might be difficult to actually become really good teams to work with, you find people will invest more and want to be there more so than the difficulties you may have had in the past.
That's wonderful. David, can you wrap us up today?
All right, thank you everyone for joining us. So please be sure to check out our PILcast series. These are 10 minutes or less episodes, micro training on federal procurement innovation topics. You can check out one of them about the resumes that James was talking about just a short while ago. And we have some last minute polls here at the bottom. Polls number 8 and 9, please take those at your convenience. Please check out the PIL DHS Connect homepage. You'll find great resources, information about trainings, can contact coaches, and can submit one-pagers as well. If you are not a member of the DHS PIL DigiBadge community, as over 2,000 people are out there, if you attend 5 webinars or 1 PIL bootcamp and use an innovative technique in a procurement, you can go ahead and submit a request for a PIL DigiBadge to join this great community of DHS innovators. And please be sure to check out, if you need help on your next procurement, go ahead and submit a PIL one-pager right on our homepage. Please be sure to check it out. We have, if you need support, once you click on the link, it'll take you to another page where you can fill in information and submit your project to request assistance, just like this team did. And we have some upcoming trainings for everyone out there. On May 11th, we have our last PIL bootcamp of the springtime. We also have our PIL bootcamp, The Next Level. This is another set of techniques for all of you to learn. They're new techniques we're teaching. So please be sure to go on to CSOD to check out the trainings. We also have coaching clinic in June as well. If you have taken a boot camp and want a refresher, or if you just need quick access to some kind of tips of innovative techniques, go to the FAI.gov and look at the PIL primer, where you can check out each technique, and they're about 10 minutes or less for each episode to get a quick reintroduction to some of the innovative techniques. And if you need any samples out there, there's lots of great samples available for techniques we talked about today, and tons of other techniques as well. You can find solicitation examples and GAO cases right on the periodic table of acquisition innovation on FAI.gov. Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. We can't wait to see you next month on PIL webinar number 64. Have a great day, everyone, and keep innovating.